So, hi everyone. The sound quality is not going to be as good as usual because I didn't bring my microphone to Slovenia, but it is what it is. I'm sorry. So, this is my video on the European Union, and I'll go over everything. I'll try to explain as well as possible. Let's see if it helps you. So, does it work? Yes, it does. Good. So, we've got here. Big difference between Europe and the European Union. Remember, this is a very, very probable question in an exam. Basically, we've got Europe as physical reality, even though it is a bit conventional because the difference between Europe and Asia is pretty much what you decide. Here we've got the line marked by the Urals and the Bosphorus Strait. And then we've got the European Union as a supranational organization. These countries here are going to end up being part of the European Union at some point. Probably this country here, but let's see how it works. So again, Europe is a continent. European Union is a supranational political and economic union. This you gotta know. This is the easiest question in an exam. What is the difference between Europe and the European Union? Okay, of course they're connected, but so we've got here the flag, and we've got the motto in Veritate Concordia, which is united in diversity. Now we've got the EU anthem, and we've got here these are the territories that right now belong to the EU or kind of. Okay, remember we've got Greenland that has a strong connection to Denmark, is kind of belongs to Denmark, but at the same time doesn't completely belong. That is why it's not exactly part of the EU, but that isn't the case with French Guiana, for example, which is a French territory. Then we've got all these countries that have at some point been colonized by Europe. You can see that there are very few countries that haven't been colonized by Europe. And we have explained how this has made Europe the cultural capital of the world. Also, it means that we have been exploiting lots of territories for a very long time, especially, for example, Spain has been extracting riches from all these countries. Portugal from Brazil, but all of the European countries are complicit in here. Then we've got these basic geographical features of Europe. We've got the most important mountain ranges, the Alps, the Apennines, the Pyrenees, then the Carpathians, and the Scandinavian mountains, actually. But the problem is the Scandinavian mountains don't belong to the European Union. That's why I didn't include them. Okay, so European Union, we've got the Pyrenees, the Alps, the Apennines, and the Carpathians. And then we've got here the temperature graph. What we say is there's moderate temperature, pleasant temperature, except for some extremes north of Sweden, south of Spain and Italy and Greece. Then we've got this cover, this forest cover. Okay. Remember that I could ask you about why it's hotter in summer and why it's colder in winter. It is a very easy explanation, but some of you couldn't give me an explanation. So we've got the most important rivers in Europe. This is something you should know about too. We've got the Danube, which is the second longest river in Europe and the longest within the EU, because the Volga River is not inside the EU. And then, we've got these 10 countries. Then we've got the Rhine and the Elbe. These two rivers are also very important, and these two rivers are also part of the explanation why Germany is what it is. Then we've got the Loire and the Tagus, which are important in their respective countries. And then we've got what I said before, the Alps, the Pyrenees, the Carpathians, the Apennines. Then population. 448 million. 450 around. And then we've got 4 million square kilometers for the EU. You might see different numbers around the internet, okay, and it could be justifiable. How big the EU is, I kind of rounded, and then again 448. It's also kind of rounding. We've got these countries that belong to the European Union, countries that belong to the Schengen area, and countries that belong to the Eurozone. And we've got here this graph. This graph explains one of the problems with the European Union, which is that the integration is still partial. We don't have a complete integration. We do have a rather complete integration of these countries, and then these countries not quite. But even these countries, some aspects are not integrated. And well, but we're going to discuss this later. Then we've got these countries that are candidates to joining the EU. Okay, important ones here. We've got Ukraine that could become part of the EU, even though, of course, this implies a lot of issues. Then we also have Kosovo. We discussed Kosovo and why it's a complicated matter, because Kosovo is not recognized by some countries. One of them, of course, Spain, for obvious reasons. Then we've got here the population of the EU and the projected population. And we can see the different projections depending on the quantity of immigration we'll receive. In general, though, it is very, very likely that the European Union is going to lose population. This is kind of not exactly true, because the European Union is going to gain some population in the mid-term, because we're going to incorporate the some countries in the Balkans, but these countries are also losing population. So regardless of these new incorporations, the European Union territories are losing population. And the only hope for increasing or keeping our population is immigration. Then we've got here the surface area in square kilometers. France being the biggest country, and then Spain, Sweden, Germany. And then we've got these other big countries like Poland, Finland, Italy, and Romania. But then it changes when we go to population, and Germany is by far the biggest, has the biggest population in Europe. We have France with 68 million, second biggest, 58 million in the case of Spain, of Italy, and then 48 in the case of Spain, and 36 in the case of Poland. And the rest of the countries are much smaller. Okay, so we've got these 5 large countries. Then languages. We discussed this a lot in class. We've got 24 official languages, and then lots of regional languages. And German, English, and French are the most spoken languages of the European Union. English is kind of paradox, because the only country that has English as an official language in the European Union is Malta. But the thing is, first, the UK was part of the European Union until recently, and second, English has acquired this status of a lingua franca. Basically, everyone speaks English regardless of their local languages. The future is going to be interesting, because we don't know if Mandarin Chinese could take the same position. I see this as a bit of a difficult thing, because English has been dominating throughout all this period of globalization. So maybe English will retain this status. But yeah. Then, of course, we talked about Catalan, which has more speakers than official languages, and how Catalan could become at some point an official language. But there's a couple countries that are pushing against this. Then we've got these key institutions. We'll talk about this later, so no problem. And then we've got strength of the European Union. This is new. I didn't talk about this. This was part of the geopolitics of the European Union, but I decided to just incorporate here. So, strength of the European Union. Our economy. The nominal GDP is 20 trillion, which is second only to the USA. So we're the second largest GDP in the world. second only to the USA. And then GDP PPP, which is the purchasing power parity, which places third after China and the US. So largest single market in the world, single market meaning that if you manage to sell something in the EU, you can sell anywhere in the EU. Okay, that's a single market, and we're the biggest single market in the EU and in the world. And then we've got, well, we're one of the biggest players in global trade and investment. We've got a very strong economy. And then we've got better income inequality, equality, and more public social support. Okay, so in general, our economy is strong and it's not as unequal as other countries. And we've got strong political, legal, and cultural influence. In general, we have also pioneered democracy and human rights. So we've got lots of things to be proud of as citizens of the European Union. Okay, there are some weaknesses. Basically, it's that integration is partial, and there are still inequalities. We have seen that inequalities are not as bad as in other countries, but they're still there. In most inequalities, have the same, basically, are explained by the countries. So I've got that Romania, for example, is one of the weakest economies. And it's because it's one of the newest countries in the EU. And even though the EU tries to make their territories more equal economically, it's still a long process. Okay. And lots of key policies like defense and taxation are decided at the national level. And that is a problem. Now, defense, however, is in the process of being integrated. So this will change. The European Union is basically a work in progress. This is something that is still happening. And then we've got that economically, in some industries, we are not as strong as China and the US. For example, artificial intelligence, semiconductors, and basically some new technologies. For example, one of the areas in which I think we should change is that we rely for technology on many American companies and Chinese companies. We should have our own phones. We should have our own operating systems. We should have our own cloud systems. And then also we depend heavily on NATO, but this is, as I have mentioned in class, this is changing. And this is a very, very recent development, but this is going to change. Then, most important question, why the European Union? Okay, and we had this justification, European history. Then we've got economy, and we've got the possibilities, cultural possibilities. Okay, this is very important for you in particular. Okay, and this, well, I mean, not going into a war with other EU members is also an important thing for you. But yeah, I mean, basically war, economy, and culture. Now, history of the European Union. We need to know that the concept of Europe has existed for a long time, but it was a very different concept from what we now think about as Europe. Okay, we've got the Greeks and the Romans, then we've got the Christians. Okay, as thing that kind of united Europe. But of course, this also unites, for example, Russia. And then we've got some rivalry among nations, the Seven Years' War, which kind of places us as. So, this 7 Years' War was a consequence of the colonial struggle. And this placed us in the center of the world because we were dominating other countries, other territories. Um, but yeah, in the 7 Years' War, you can already see that there's a problem because we're always fighting among each other in Europe, and we need to change that. And then we've got World War One and World War Two, which were basically conflicts between countries in the European Union. Remember that both World War One and World War Two happened because countries such as France and Germany started fighting against each other, and then they dragged the rest of the world with them. So not having European countries fight against each other is very important for world peace, basically. And then we've got that after the Second World War, we've got, well, all these reasons for unity that I explained. And then we've got the Marshall Plan. Now, the Marshall Plan is very complex to explain, but basically, it's a plan in which the United States gave Europe lots of money for its reconstruction. There are several reasons. One of them is that, well, there was the competition by the Soviet Union, and they thought that if they lost the opportunity to get Europe to the capitalist side, to the United States side, that could be dangerous because the Soviet Union could expand to the rest of countries of Europe, and well, they didn't want that. There's also the issue that having a stronger Europe was good for the United States because they would have markets to sell to. And then, of course, there's also there are good things to this. I mean, I think that part of the Marshall Plan was the United States honestly wanting to help reconstruct Europe. So part of it was honest, well, part of it was good, but there's also a vested interest in that. So then we've got in 1950 the Schuman Declaration. Now, this Schuman Declaration, Schuman was the external affairs minister in France, and this guy basically said we need to start uniting in Europe, and he said that the most practical way would be to start taking small steps towards integration, which is, again, a brilliant idea. Because if we had started trying to create the European Union, like the whole thing, probably it couldn't have worked. But if we start integrating like little by little, basically, we start with the coal and steel industries, which are very important, but they're only two industries. So we could start integrating. And then that's what happens. Okay. So the Treaty of Paris, we've got the ECSC, the European Coal and Steel Coalition, which is very important. And in this ECSC, we've got Belgium, Netherlands, Luxembourg, and then we've got France, Germany, and Italy. Germany, of course, I mean the West Germany, the part that remains, well, not communist. And then we've got the Treaties of Rome, which happened 6 years after that, a short time. And then here we've got the European Economic Community, Euratom, and CAP, which is the Common Agricultural Policy. And then we've got in 67 the merger treaty, by which all of this becomes the EEC. And then after this, after we've got the European Economic Community in the merger treaty, then other countries want to start participating in this. And we've got here the first expansion, which is 73 with Denmark, Ireland, and the UK. And in 73, also we've got the European Regional Development Funds, which benefit the UK a lot. They're benefited from this basically because these regional development funds don't go to countries, but to specific regions. But because the European community wants all regions to be competitive, not only countries. It's a big difference because in rich countries there could be poor regions. This happens a lot, and that is the reason why the UK benefited from these regional development funds. So then we've got in 79 first elections. 81 we've got Greece joining the EU, which is historically very important because remember that the origin of this idea of Europe lies in Greece. Then we've got 1984 Sprit, which is these space exploration program, okay, by the European Union. And then we've got the independence of Greenland, which means that Greenland is not part of the European Union or the European Economic Community, okay? But it's connected to the European community. It's kind of in the middle. The biggest reason why Greenland didn't want to be part of the European Economic Community was because of fishing, because the European Economic Community establishes some rules for fishing, and Greenland didn't want to follow these rules. So 86, we've got Spain and Portugal, and 86 too, we've got the Single European Act. This is a very important act by which we decide that we want to move forward to a union that is not only an economic community, but actually a European Union, which means a political union, a legal union. Then 87, Erasmus is established, and then the 1989, the Wall of Berlin falls. This doesn't mean an immediate reunion of Germany, but it means that it's coming. And then we've got 92, Maastricht. Maastricht is where the beginning of the European Union is signed. And then we've got a very, very fast progress. We've got 93, the single market, 94, the European Economic Area, very connected issues. Then we've got 95, Austria, Sweden, Finland. Then 95, we've also got Schengen. Schengen is this treaty by which you don't need any passport to travel between members of this Schengen area. Now, not all countries in the European Union belong to Schengen. Not all countries of the European Union belong to the Eurozone. It's still a work in progress. Some countries belong to Schengen and don't belong to European Union. So it's kind of in between there. Then we've got the Treaty of Amsterdam in 1997, and in 1999 we've got the euro. But the euro as a virtual currency at this point. Okay, we don't have physical notes. Then we've got the Treaty of Nice in 2001. In 2002, we've got euro coins and notes, so actual physical euro coins and notes. And there are all these anecdotes with people being very confused with the euro coins and notes. Then 2004, we've got this huge expansion. Most notably, we've got Slovenia becoming part of the European Union. And then in 2005, we've got this constitution. So the European Union starts resembling more and more an actual country, which it isn't, and I don't think it wants to be, but it wants to be something similar. Then Bulgaria and Romania, 2007, and then we've got the Treaty of Lisbon. 2008, we've got this huge financial crisis. It was a very, very huge deal. We're going to talk more about this when we talk about the United States, because it began in the United States and it could happen again. So I want you to know about that. So 2010, actually, 2 years after that, several countries need aid from the central bank. And the central bank has its first big challenge, which is, okay, some countries are struggling with their economies because of the 2008 financial crisis. So in 2012, we win the Nobel Peace Prize, and it's given to the European Union basically because of what we discussed before, which is that the European Union has helped prevent war. 2013, we've got Croatia. It's this country here that has the Baltic coast. Then Paris Agreement in 2015. 2016, regrettably, the UK votes to leave the EU, implementing this Brexit. But it's not immediate. Okay, in 2016, the UK votes, and until 2020, it's not going to take place. Then we've got the European Green Deal in 2019, and then 2021, we've got the conference on the future of Europe, in which several important matters are discussed. But a couple more important things are going to happen, which is first, 2022, Russia invades Ukraine. This is important for Europe because Ukraine has been trying to access the European Union for a long time. But until 2022, we are avoiding to go forward with this because we are afraid of Russia taking action against this. But once Russia has taken action against this, then, well, there's nothing to avoid there. Now, of course, the process of Ukraine joining the European Union is going to be a very long one, if it ever ends up happening, because of, well, the reason is that right now they're in a war with Russia. Then we've got the European Union and the USA decoupling in 2025, basically since Donald Trump raised to power in rise to power in the USA? Well, first, the USA has been disconnecting from NATO, and second, they have been implementing these tariffs, economic tariffs, which, I mean, tariffs are a sensible economic tool in some cases. It's just that in this case in particular, it might not be. But well, it's happening. And yeah, so the European Union now is in a moment in which they have to push towards deeper integration in both defense and economy. I think it could end up being a good thing because this is the kind of things that end up fostering deeper integration. So, how does the EU work? This is a very complex matter. Okay, so first we've got the European Council. Now, the European Council is the heads of state or government. Remember, these are different things. In the case of Spain, we've got the head of government, which is Pedro Sanchez, and the head of state, which is Philip VI. Okay, so then this is not a legislative body, but it kind of defines the general direction of the EU. And then we've got that this body is meets 4 times a year, every 3 months, and the current president is Antonio Costa, and they're elected every 2.5 years. And the big thing here is that for any piece of legislation that the parliament decides, the council can veto it. The council can say just no. Then we've got the European Commission. That's the executive arm. This is the government of the European Union. Okay, very, very important, probably the most important body. And then we've got these 27 commissioners, one from each member, and there's a new president every 5 years. And this president of the European Commission is the most similar thing we have to an actual president of the European Union, and that is Ursula von der Leyen, who came to power in 2019 and will leave power, if everything goes right, in 2029. And then the Commission is vital, okay? Manages the budget, represents the EU, and proposes new legislation to the Parliament. Now, the Parliament doesn't propose new legislation, it's the Commission. And then the Parliament is the only body that we directly elect. When we vote in European elections, the next elections will happen in 2029, and you will be able to vote in them, remember. We vote for the European Parliament, okay? And we've got that they have a legislative role, a supervisory role, and a budgetary role. And there's 720 MEPs. Sounds like a lot, but remember, we have a very, very large population. And there's lots of different countries, lots of different ideas, so it's necessary. Now, very important, they are seated based on their party, not their country of origin. This is intentional. We want to mix up these people and stop them from just representing their country. We want them to represent their ideas, their political party. Okay, and then the current president is Roberto Metsola, who is from Malta, and is from the European Popular Party. So, about how many seats each country has. Basically, every country has minimum 6 seats, and then the remaining seats are distributed according to population. But the idea is that we try to boost the representation of smaller countries and reduce the representation of larger countries. And here we can see the distribution. So these are the main political parties. I don't think it's very important to know this. And then essentially this is how legislation passes in the EU. Okay, the Commission proposes new legislation, the Parliament amends and votes. Amends, remember I said make small corrections. Okay, and then the Council ratifies or vetoes this legislation. this amendment, remember I talked about USB-C, the standard for charges. Well, the parliament would be the one saying, yes, USB-C, but there should be some exceptions and these kind of things. And then the Court of Justice, the idea is that there are two different bodies inside. There's the Court of Justice and the General Court. The Court of Justice tries to make sure that the law is the same in every country, or at least is compatible between countries. It doesn't need to be the same, but it needs to be compatible one with the other. Okay. But then we've got the General Court that handles specific cases. And then we've got, forget this. Okay, I'm going to eliminate this. Good. So we've got this European culture, art, and thought. I had to reduce this a lot because remember I told you that we're basically the capital in culture and thought and everything, which comes from our role as colonial powers. And then we've got these landmarks. I think this is very easy for you to at least memorize. Like, I don't know, you should know where the Brandenburg Gate is, and you should know where the parliament, well, actually, this one maybe not, but Neuschwanstein Castle, where it is. Well, that is. You should know these things. Or Mont Saint-Michel. And then we've got literature. Now, here you should be able to say who wrote this, Les Miserables, okay? And who wrote The Divine Comedy, for example. And if you could say what the book is about, that could be an extra, okay? So again, we've got Faust, the Odyssey, Ulysses. Easy to study. I don't think it's such a big deal, but they are a big deal, like culturally. And then we've got painting. Again, the same thing. I should be able to ask you who painted The Last Supper, who painted Starry Night, and who painted The Persistence of Memory, and so on and so forth. Okay. Remember that I introduced these things that are kind of cheating because composition 8, well, Vasily Kandinsky is technically Russian, but, well, Bauhaus, very important, Bauhaus. So then we've got all these things that I left out. Probably next year I'll introduce some more, but I didn't want to overload you with information. And then what else is missing? Well, this is important, okay? Important women in the European Union's history. We've got Simone de Beauvoir, we've got Hannah Arendt, okay? This one made very, very important works regarding totalitarianism, okay, which are possibly going to become relevant very, very soon. And then we've got Gentileschi, who is one of the most important Baroque painters, and she painted this important piece of art called Judith slaying Holofernes, very gory. And then we've got Hypatia, I don't know how to pronounce this exactly. And then we've got the talking points. Now, talking points is things that we should discuss a bit more deeply. Now, with a couple of classes, I was able to discuss this deeply. Not so much in the case of third SOB, right? We didn't have time, but we might have some more time when I come back. The first thing is, should there be a European army? What is better, a federal Europe or a strong independent states? Do we want the United States of Europe? And in general, the big question regarding the European Union is if we want to move forward to a United States of Europe. I don't think that's the idea, but we need the reality to be closer to the United States of Europe without ever getting to actual United States of Europe, okay? So I don't think we need to make every single country lose all sovereignty, but we need countries to give a bit more of their sovereignty to the European Union. We need the defense capabilities to be boosted, okay? And this is probably going to happen, okay? And we also can learn from Brexit. How did Brexit happen? And this is kind of dangerous because the thing is, it happened rather stupidly. Um, the UK shouldn't have left the European Union, but it happened because, well, there was this campaign that was based basically on right-wing nationalism and anti-immigration racism, and it it didn't help the UK, but it happened. And the thing is, every time this happens, it kind of pushes back European integration a lot, and the fact that this can happen is problematic. Now, should other countries leave? The thing is, there are in every single country in the European Union, there is a political party that pushes for that country leaving the European Union. It's going to happen. Now, let's see if this happens more. I don't think it's gonna, but it might. Now, the euro, we talked about this a lot. And the thing is, the euro has lots of advantages, also some disadvantages. Okay, especially with in the case of weaker economies. The thing is, for example, in the case of Spain, which is not such a weak economy, but in comparison, it is. And we've got this problem with European prices, but Spanish salaries. That is an issue. Also, the thing is, you cannot control your own economy because your currency depends on other countries, which makes your currency more stable, but at the same time doesn't makes you less flexible. Then Schengen area, the big thing. Remember that you watched this film Mediterranean that talked about immigration and such. Well, Schengen area that's one of the things that we should discuss. And then if the EU is fair to all its members. Now, we've got first, do richer countries dominate decision making? Well, remember that Germany has the most members in the European Parliament by far. And if we count the big ones, like basically Germany and France and then Italy, well, these countries, even though the parliament is designed to make it less probable that it is dominated by big countries. Still, it happens. So we need to discuss that. Then, is the East-West divide still present inside the EU? The East-West divide is, well, Western countries uh, didn't belong to the Soviet Union. The West countries did belong to the Soviet Union, and there's still a strong cultural and economical division there. Then we've got the North-South divide because this was especially important in the 2008 financial crisis. There were lots of accusations by countries in the north of Europe to countries in the south of Europe, such as Italy and Spain and Greece, that those countries were not doing their part for Europe, which is quite a grave accusation. And are the rules the same for everyone? Well, probably not, because again, richer countries can do more or less what they want. And that is it. I hope this helped you. You told me it does. If you have any questions, of course, my email is available. I'll be here in Slovenia for the rest of the week, but I will have some free time. So just tell me whatever you need.